we are here today at the Coleman Entrepreneurship Center. I'm Maya Renko, the professor of entrepreneurship at DePaul University, Coleman Chair of Entrepreneurship, and I am joined today by Xavier Ramey, who is the CEO of Justice Informed, a successful entrepreneur, and he is also a graduate of DePaul's economics program from 2007. So I'm going to introduce Xavier here, and then we will move on to a Q&A with him. So Justice Informed, that Xavier founded, is a social impact consulting firm based here in Chicago. Xavier is an award-winning social strategist, a noted public speaker, and conflict mediator. Combining his background in economics, extensive management, and social impact experience, and direct action campaigning in the Black Lives Matter movement, Xavier leads a company that brings a wealth of experience and networks to clients seeking catalyzed strategies for inclusion, philanthropy, corporate social responsibility, and community engagement. So Xavier, welcome. Thanks for being here. You are now the entrepreneur behind Justice Informed. Tell our students, tell our audience, what does Justice Informed do?
Well, it is a social impact consulting firm. So many people may be familiar with what a consulting firm is. In my words, what we do is we understand the power of words. We understand how words create space for ideas, and ideas inform different narratives that people believe about the world. That's the point where my firm comes in, where we attempt to use better words, more comprehensive words, more inclusive words, to stimulate different types of ideas about the people and the countries and the communities that many people may hold implicit or explicit biases that don't actually speak to the truths of those people's lives and their opportunities, but also the harm that they've experienced when they engage in working side by side with you or others or anyone when they get into the job. And so our work is to create and shape new narratives about people who have always been there, but have often not had the ability to own their own story. And the stories that were believed about them often diminish their ability to pursue what their brilliance might have provided them in the world, whether it be jobs, whether it be opportunities, or whether we see, like in the last year here in the United States, whether it would even be the safety from being killed by a police officer. And so our job is to create and shape new narratives. Those narratives are executed through strategies. And so as a consulting firm, we focus on using words to create ideas in the minds of our clients that allow for different narratives that will then be deployed through different strategies. So for example, if the narrative you believe, and I'll go back to this conversation around like racial inclusion and equity, if the narrative you believe about, let's say, young Black men is one of criminality or one of non-professionalism, like they're not very professional when they come in, the way they talk, the way they dress, whatever it may be, then the narrative for them might be a lower wage job, or the narrative for them might be police as a form of community development. But if the narrative is that they are actually responding to the traumas and the harms that they've experienced as individuals, and there's incredible opportunity, but also innovations in the spaces where they inhabit already, then you'll take a different lens to the strategy of engaging them. You'll also have a different lens if you want to bring them into the workplace and how to recruit them. And so you see, working sort of forward and backwards, we come in and try to, again, use these words to create ideas, to shift narratives, to shape strategies. We work with Fortune 500s, we work with tiny startup organizations, we build their diversity, equity, inclusion strategies. We also conduct overall organizational assessments, meaning that we look at either just their cultural practices, so the ways that people experience the company or nonprofit or foundation, or we also go in and conduct audits where we review all of their personnel information, their talent management operations. We look at their communications and marketing. We look at how they're speaking about their clients as well as how they're speaking about their staff. We look at the ways in which their organizational charts are either set up to either create inefficiencies or ineffectiveness as it relates to things like gender, or as it relates to things like race, nationality, language, et cetera, or any other point of marginality or minoritization. And then we create the strategies that help these companies to clean that up.
That's great.
So that's our work.
That's great. Thank you. So what made you decide to do this as an entrepreneur? I mean, the work you do is incredibly important and so interesting, but you also had a lot of experience working for other companies, nonprofits, before you decided to do this. What made you take the entrepreneurial leap?
Well, I grew up in an entrepreneurial house. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had a social impact consulting firm, this is not necessarily new to me.
Mhm.
He was working on the political side, primarily looking at bringing more resources to the majority Black and brown West Side of the city of Chicago back in the 80s and the 90s. And so one, it's just not new. It's something I grew up with, and I've always known that it was possible to direct your own path. What I didn't know was the cost of directing your own path. I see it more clearly now, what my father was going through as an entrepreneur. I see now what it means to, as I say, what entrepreneurship is taking on the consequences of your truth. That's what I believe entrepreneurship to be. Sometimes those consequences are revenues. Sometimes those consequences are sleepless nights. But you're taking on your truth and its consequences. The second thing was I looked at entrepreneurship was there was a series of experiences that I had in the workplace that led me to realize that what my truth was and what I felt I was special at and what I felt my purpose could be in the world. And additionally, what I saw that being connected to in terms of the need that the world had, its time had come. So years ago, probably in 2009 or 2010, I'd actually planned on starting a community bank. I was working at a nonprofit in North Lawndale, and I was the head of development, meaning I was the chief fundraiser and chief marketing officer. And I just realized that all these things we're raising money for, this isn't going to solve the problem. It is helping the effect of the problem, but this is not going to resolve the problem. And I thought about starting a community bank. Didn't know anything about starting a bank. I was kind of, I think, naive and a bit arrogant I was only like 5 years out of school, and I was like, I can do whatever. You know, I took a couple of economics classes. I even took the economics of socialism. Like I know both sides of this conversation. And I was thinking of just running headfirst into my first entrepreneurial endeavor. And instead I slowed it down. And I decided to go and look at other people's engagements in different types of social impact work. So I got some placements, one in Ethiopia, one in Kenya, to see it from a global perspective, then came back to Chicago and went upstream to see, well, what is creating these societal issues that I was so frustrated about, that I grew up in, that were not resolved by the work I was doing. And that's why I started taking jobs at successively higher institutions. One being the United Way, being able to be a program officer, oversee millions of dollars in grant funds, also exposed me to the networks where I realized that it's in people. People literally don't see what the problem is. They don't understand that when they're talking about, we need more diversity in our job, they then take those wages and they self-segregate the city. like they actively choose exclusion on their off time and demand diversity when they're at work. That's a cognitive dissonance. And they're seeing themselves as innocent in the entire process. Well, something's off here. And so when I went to the University of Chicago, they gave me the opportunity to start small projects throughout the city that were about social impact and how do we connect government and corporate and nonprofit through the lens of social equity rather than just social change. But at the end of the day, in that space, I didn't, again, feel that the ambitions of my employer were the ambitions that I held, but also the fears that my employer had about how urgent we needed to make the work and how clear we needed to be about language and how quickly we needed to move. I didn't have the same fears they had.
Yeah.
And so in order to create a space for me to take on the consequences and the return on investments, I would have to make my own space and deal with what it takes to start your own thing. And also because of what had been happening with the election of former President Trump, the rise in white nationalism, these sorts of things, I saw it was truly it was time. It was time for people to not be informed by the bottom line, not be informed by marketing, not being informed by just profitability, but what would it be if we were informed by what justice can provide?
That's great. That's really helpful, and I think a lot of those thoughts you just shared, they resonate with a lot of our students too, who have passions for things that they feel strongly about and don't necessarily have the space yet to be themselves in that regard. So sometimes you just go through that path of like working for others and learning from them, learning from the organizations that you can learn from, and then take the leap. So you are in the business, if I call it the business, of selling ideas. You sell narratives, you sell service, you sell consulting. And a lot of the things that we learn about at business school, and probably some of the things you learned about when you were in the economics and other classes at DePaul Business School, were about products. And this,
Yes.
yes, right? So having been now an entrepreneur selling a service and selling ideas, what do you think are the biggest differences between the two if you're an entrepreneur in one world versus another?
Part of it, what you have to understand. So the same concepts in product-based businesses where you're saying, who's my ideal customer, right? Who's my, well, for me, client, who's my ideal client? And understanding them deeply. I just got off of a call, right? Where we were just, my job there was I had 1 hour to talk to an organization that had no clue what they wanted. They just knew things hurt as it relates to our relationships within the workplace. And that's affecting our ability to actually execute on our mission. And so we need to figure out, we don't even know how to understand what's going wrong. It's sort of like walking into the doctor's office and you're like, cough, cough, sneeze, sneeze. You don't even know that it's a cold. You don't know if it's, emphysema. You have no language for it. And so the first thing that I had to realize was that the most valuable asset to differentiate our services and our strategy was not actually to talk about services and strategy. It was to talk about the darkness that our clients felt they were in. So the first thing was really leaning into a clear understanding of pain point. And at that point, I decided that the strategy to actually market our services, because many people had no clue what we were doing. They had no clue why we were necessary. They didn't also believe that it was that bad in their company, right? Like last year when George Floyd was killed, people were like, I didn't even know it was this bad in America. And you have this entire group of people of color, like, are you kidding me? The wave of diversity, equity, inclusion jobs, like that speaks to the fact that companies, when we first entered the marketplace, they didn't actually have the value proposition to hire us. And so them defending a proposal we would send and creating budget space for that was so hard. I mean, our first year, services that we now would sell for no less than probably $75,000 to $100,000. I remember we did those 9-month projects for $12,000, 2-person teams. $12,000 for 2 people to work for 9 months. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. I was just excited to get a contract. Yeah. I was really excited. You're like, somebody believes this is great. And then you're 6 months in, like, I wish they didn't believe and I wish I never sold it. I'm really tired and I can't make rent. And so you realize, like, it's important to set the value proposition. It's also important to understand the business mechanics of your model. But the way in which but then how do you sell? How do you create value at 75,000 or 100,000 for something that had the same service at 12? Right? Like that requires a different linguistic capacity, a different understanding of your value proposition, which again requires that you deeply understand who you're talking to, deeply understand your potential client. So what I started doing was I started doing keynotes. I started doing panels. About 3 weeks before I officially launched, I started looking actively. I set up a moonshot and I said, the first thing I need to do is I need to be able to launch my voice into a different stratosphere of the economy in which I seek to operate in. So I was trying to figure out how I could get a TED Talk.
And you did.
It was a moonshot. I was like, I got to get a TED Talk. I got a TED Talk. You can find it on YouTube now. And I took the TED stage and I talked about what the world needed. I briefly mentioned Justice Informed. I was really bad at marketing back then. But I talked more so about what the world needs. And that opened up space for so many people to see, oh, there's a guy in Chicago who's talking about this. Underneath all of that is when you have something that's niche, like our services and products are very niche. You have something that's niche. It's not about finding 1,000 customers. We may have no more than 25 a year. Right. And that allows for us to, now we have, a bunch of folks on our team and such, that allows for all of us to be compensated and still work within our equity-based compensation models, right? Everyone has to be paid at or above a living wage in order to work at our company. These sorts of interns as well, like this is the type of thing, like, but you have to get your voice out there to the people that actually need it. And when you're selling a service, you have to know that not everybody wants it. Much like a product, you got to find your client and speak to them, not just in their voice, but through their pain. Open up that darkness. Yeah.
So to follow up from that, I guess, so what part of the work that you do, you're the keynote speaker, a lot of the Justice Informed brand is kind of in you as a person. What part of the work that you do is the most exciting thing to you, like as an entrepreneur, like working on your own? What's the best thing about the work that you do?
Seeing people grow. At the end of the day, I happen to be a business person, and that you can call an entrepreneur, but at the end of the day, I love seeing people grow in their understanding of themselves. I literally love watching it happen. You can see the epiphany moments happen in their eyes. You can see the way they then immediately have this, like they just got sucked back from a parachute, right? And it's like, whoa, I was doing life. I wasn't doing life right.
Right.
Oh, this is the effect of how I think about housing. Oh, this is the effect of the fact that if you scrub my LinkedIn page, you scrub my Facebook friends, 98% of my friends are all white. Oh, this is the effect downstream of how I think about socialization. Oh, this is what anti-racism means. I love seeing people have these epiphanies. And then immediately, I love when they really, really want to immediately move into action. To say, how do I start becoming more proximate, more relational, more accountable to the people that I did not even know I wasn't choosing? One of the things that I often tell my team, and I love seeing that with my team as we've started to grow the team. We've only got 5 people, but as we started to grow, it's so interesting. They all go through that same journey. They first come into the company and they can put their fists up. They're ready to fight the man. We're going to burn down the patriarchy. We're going to destroy the spectrum. We're going to do it. We're going to take justice and equity. Yeah. And they're like super excited. And I'm like, I'm with you. But what's your invitation? That's always my question. But what's your invitation? What party are you inviting them to? Because racism is paying their bills right now. So you got to have a better party. Anti-racism can't sound like an indictment. It has to sound like a better party than the racist party that they don't even know they're at. The sexist party that they're already at, which means you have to know what value they're already finding in the community that's hurting you. I love seeing when they finally understand that. I happen to be able to operate a business that becomes almost like a petri dish for those types of experiences that create better forms, more accountable and powerful forms of human relationship.
That's beautifully said. Yeah. Let's see. So I want to kind of revisit something I asked earlier, and from the perspective, I guess, of the students who are going to be viewing this interview. So many students, and listening to an entrepreneur like you, who's really passionate about the thing that they do and has had success in what they do, it's really exciting to think of, maybe I can become an entrepreneur, and I have this passion I want to pursue. So you've seen both worlds. You worked for other organizations, and now you're an entrepreneur. What advice would you give to someone who's about to graduate from DePaul with a business degree as to, what can or what should they learn from a startup, working for a startup, working for some kind of a business, versus should they just go and take the leap to entrepreneurship right away when their ideas are fresh and they have this passion and excitement?
Well, the first thing I'll say is unless you truly know you know your craft and you have the bandwidth in your life, please don't jump into entrepreneurship. Please don't do that. Um, I started two smaller companies before I launched this work
Mm-hmm.
to see if I even liked it. You can go right now to xavierpaulphotography.com. I have a photography company and I set that up and I was like, yep, I'm going to be doing photography because I was good at photography. And I actually started in 2014 when Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson, just documenting social movements. Um, and then bringing that back to Chicago. But I also did weddings and corporate events and headshots. And I wanted to see whether I actually liked invoicing. I wanted to see not whether I liked doing what my talent gave me. I wanted to see whether I liked creating structure around my talent. That's what entrepreneurship is.
Mm-hmm.
It's about creating structure. If you don't like creating structure, don't be an entrepreneur. Right after this call, I got another call, one of the big 4 consulting firms, around a contract to come down to Atlanta to work with them in the fall. But you know what I'm doing between that? Reading through a 17-page contract from this new accounting firm that we're bringing on because the contract we had last year didn't go well. And I still got to figure out the taxes. And I've got 3 things from the Illinois Department of Revenue to finish filing and 2 other things from ADP payroll process. If you don't like doing that stuff and you don't have a bankroll to start you off, do not jump in this water. Do not jump in this water. Enjoy you may not be on the yacht, but at least enjoy the canoe. Be on another boat for a while to really get your bearings. I can't stress that enough. Don't jump into entrepreneurship with pride. Jump into it because it's the world's time for your truth. Don't jump into this because you think you're smart and I got to do this. Or don't jump into it because you're like, well, the only way to really be free is to own it yourself. That's not true. Don't jump into it because you're like, well, the only way to own my income is if I don't have any caps on my income. You know what? Justice Informed has a cap on my income. And that's because we have equity-based compensation. There's a certain rate I can't go above. And that's 5 times the lowest paid worker. I still show up to work every day. I'll never make what some of those big CEOs make, and I'm okay with that. But at the end of the day, that's also the point of my company, to create a model for what needs to become in the world. Like, that's the thing. Like, if you're not willing to deal with those questions, for instance, for me, when I was out recruiting last year, trying to find top talent to come in for 6-figure cash deals plus equity, and you can't find one person to take it up because they're like, you're putting a cap on this, like, I'm good, I'm not doing it. And unless you want to be rejected time and time and time again, often by Black people who look like me, who say no. And that's not just, it doesn't just hurt, it feels like betrayal. Well, if you're not ready for the emotional rigor of entrepreneurship, of your family asking you, are you still going to be doing this? Of trying to figure out how come I got all these friends, but I can't get one introduction to a 6-figure client? Like, you know what I mean? Like, unless you're ready for that, go learn. Go learn deeply about the problem statement that creates the conflict in your heart. Go learn deeply. Go work at another organization. Spend your time. Be humble. And one of the best things that I did every single job I had before jumping out into entrepreneurship was I was an excellent follower. An excellent follower of brilliant people who gave me jobs I was not smart enough to do up front. They were like, this kid can work. This kid he's curious. He's got a ton of initiative. I'm going to bet big on him, and I can save 15 grand. I'm going to hire him. And that's how I learned so much. I jumped into so many sectors. I was in philanthropy. I was on the commodities trading floor at the Mercantile Exchange for a couple of years. I was a portfolio manager for, the world's largest philanthropic non-governmental funder. Like, all of these roles gave me the lens that now gives me the expertise, the credibility, and the network to successfully launch something in a city like Chicago, where the average entrepreneur of color only has 4 days of cash on hand, and Justice Informed doesn't operate with less than 6 months. Right? That's smart money management, right? Where I don't have, we've never marketed ever. Everything is word of mouth because of the reputation that I spent 10 to 12 years building.
Yeah.
So I'm not out here trying to figure out a sales funnel. I'm out here trying to figure out a better service model. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
That's all of those lessons are so important for anyone looking to go into entrepreneurship, and I appreciate you sharing those.
But if you are brilliant and it is that time, I'm just saying, like, if it is that moment in time, I'm just saying, like, and you think you got it, you got the sauce, you got the juice, jump.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I don't think that's for everybody. And a lot of the ways that people talk about entrepreneurship are actually very problematic.
Yeah. All right. So I'm conscious I'm keeping you away from that document. You said 17 or 70 pages. So I'm going to ask you one more question because I'm really curious to hear the answer to this one. What's your vision of where you want to be? You talked a lot about how you're balancing, like this financial versus social mission. It has to be financially sustainable, but at the same time, in your business especially, you are all about the justice and social impact and all of that. So 5 or 10 years into the future, if you can imagine, where would you like to be with your company?
When I first started Justice Informed, I had this thought in my mind that I wanted to change the face of expertise. That's why we're in the thinking business. I wanted to change the face of expertise. Right now, the face of expertise, when you think about a consultant, you don't think of a man who looks like me. Not you specifically, but I mean the world. Like, the world doesn't imagine me when they think of a consultant. Now, I'm executive advisor to Fortune 500 executives right now. I've walked numerous multi-million dollar institutions through incredible moments of crises. But you wouldn't expect that. That's a problem. That's a problem. When I started this firm, the purpose was to change the face of expertise, to create living wage opportunities and dynamic solutions that came from the minds and out of the urgency of pace of people who needed the work done, not people who were interested in just learning about the work. 5 to 10 years from now, what I hope Justice Informed is it has been successful in introducing, declaring, and solidifying the expectation that consultants can look like me, that consultants can look like a trans woman, that consultants are everywhere throughout the indigenous tribal lands, that the ability to own the definition of impact can come from the people who need it most. And that also they own the means of production. That's a Marxist term, I will acknowledge. They own the means of production because the operational model of the company allowed for profit sharing such that everyone grew as the company grew. And the solutions that they provided the world, words to ideas, to narratives, to strategies, to solutions, the solutions actually repaired the harm in their communities. And that we are doing that in such a way that we have offices in every major city, but also that we've brought the conversation of equity to rural America. And that we've crossed that racial and economic class barrier to make this an actual nationwide conversation. We're fortunate enough right now to also be working internationally. We have clients now in the UK, which is just wild to me. We have requests coming in from Africa, which is wild to me. Perhaps we're there, but as far as for where I'm looking right now, here in my home, in my city in Chicago, and I believe this is my city, I take responsibility for this city. People expect people like me, perhaps people like your students as well, to not only be the face of the expertise, to be the drivers of it, and to be the recipients of the benefits of their expertise.
Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for being such a wonderful example for our students, and I sincerely thank you for taking the time from your really busy schedule to do this for our students and for our constituents.